Hello and welcome everyone to the SPL waiting room. My name's GoreMiser, and I will be your shepherd through the day, including the SPL a little bit later. I'll be hosting that desk there. And we've got a lot that's going to be coming. Of course, we'll have Finch and Dave on a little bit later, as well as Mifflin coming in. We're going to be talking about some of the gods that were meta, but maybe aren't necessarily showing up now. A lot of fun conversations to be had, but the very first thing I want to talk about today is actually a response to what I talked about last week, which was that last week I was talking all about how Onher was just dominating the SPL and how Onher was the guy to keep your eye on. And then immediately that week, Onher did start to get banned a little bit more there, but somebody started catching up in terms of picks, and that is the king right behind him. One was King of the Jungle, one is the King of Camelot. King Arthur jumping up to the top here. Just one pick less than what Onher has overall, but a much better win rate overall. He's over at 61% total win rate versus Onher's 54, so he's been dominating a little bit more than that. And get this, he's in 6 of the 8 Pro League's top 5 picks. Granted, that ranges. Teams like, I believe it's the Bolts and the Kings have him as their most picked god, whereas there are teams like the Scarabs who have him down to number 5 along with the Leviathans. Someone that is high priority, yet not always getting scooped up. He is one of the most top 3 gods that we have. Again, just under Onher in that regard. But the reason this topic came up for me was specifically because of the week between the two, right? I spent last week lamenting about how Onher was so great and why he was so positive. And then Onher got 3 less picks that week than what we got to see. And he had just slightly, again, over a 50% win rate, whereas King Arthur was played 10 of the 12 games, was only banned for one of those, and he had a 70% win rate at that. So something I think to be worried about is what he is going to be bringing to the solo lane and to these team fights. I think this week is going to be another good week, probably for both of these picks, but I think keep your eyes on King Arthur, because as of right now, he seems to be the guy that is the make or break in a lot of these fights. It'll be interesting to see what these guys are able to do with it when you get them into the right hands, and again, how that's going to be locked down. A very, very fun pick, very versatile kit, and admittedly, I'm having trouble thinking of some of the good counter matchups, so definitely keep your eyes on him either in the bans column, more than likely up in those top 3 for either your first pick or your second pick team. He's not going to be able to make it all the way down through 10 bans, though. I really, really doubt that one. Either way, it's going to be a fun one to watch throughout this week. Of course, there's still, like 40 some odd gods, maybe a little more, that need to be picked, so maybe it gets replaced by somebody that we aren't expecting just yet. But before we get into anything about what we expect to see and people who haven't been played yet, instead we need to look at what happened last week. So I've got none other than Finch and Dave beside me, as normal. And, guys, this has been a really solid start to the year for a lot of these teams. Week 3 has been completed. We're almost at the halfway mark. I think that happens after this week. And so, Dave, for you, man, what stood out in week number 1? Not week number 1, week number 3 for you that really kind of cemented in your brain?
Look, they only had one game, but honestly, the way the Bolts are playing is actually very surprising, I think, first and foremost. And not that they're playing well, it's just that they're playing as well as they are. We figured that this would be a team that would have similar struggles to what the Renegades had to deal with in previous years and in Season 7 and moving on. They didn't really change their roster. They added Haddix, which has been a great addition, by the way. But more specifically to the Bolts, I think Barracuda and Venenu have had a couple fantastic sets in a row, and that is nothing but a great indicator for this team moving forward, because you know what you're going to get with Haddix nowadays. You're going to get this aggressive W key in your face, run it down in a good way most of the time, type play style. Awesome Jake likes to match that energy. Lasbra's kind of this flex pick, but specifically with Barracuda and Venenu, finding that consistency again is going to be the most important. Here's what you've got from Barracuda in the last 6 games. 6 straight games, 3 straight sets for the Olympus Bolts here. 315, 306, 715, 718, 938, 506. All for Barracuda. All incredible KDAs. And Barracuda doesn't really show any signs of stopping here. So I think if this team can continue to play around Barra and Venenu, if you want to shift the discussion as well, Venenu had a fantastic week this past weekend. The Tiamat pick has only looked good in the hands of a couple of mid laners. So this is one, when the Bolts start to play moving forward, either expect to see it banned, expect to see it prioritized by the other team, or have it game planned against, because 7-3-11, 5-1-10 were Venenu's 2 games here in this previous week. And so only one set played in this past week, in week 3 for the Bolts. But it looked incredible, not only for the entire team, and it's against the Oni Warriors, who is a very good roster there as well, but Barracuda and Venenu, the 2 guys who you really need to leverage to get this team on a winning streak. They're playing some of their best Smite here at the moment. They've got a tough week here this week. Look, you're going up against the Jade Dragons today, and then you're going up against the Kings later on. So this is where you're going to get a good feel on the Bolts and Barracuda and Venenu specifically.
Definitely an interesting position, and like you said, this weekend going to be a grueling grind for the Bolts. They are 1 win behind the Jade Dragons streak that's been going on. The Dragons up there at a 4 swing. Everything has just been in their favor. Maybe the Bolts can end it, maybe they can't. Their last loss was to the Leviathan, so another one of those teams that we do keep up there in that top discussion. So it'll be fun to watch over those a little bit later. But Finch, what about for you? What was standing out for week number 1 for you? Dave's got the Bolts. Do you have your eyes somewhere else?
Yeah, I do, and it's on the team that's going to give the Bolts their 2nd loss this weekend. Sorry, Dave, they get to one-up you, it seems, every single time. It's the Kings, man. Obviously, this team, to me, is the biggest surprise in the SPL this year, and it's not even particularly close. This team could have very easily taken a whole phase and a half to get good. I don't think anyone would have complained, and I think the reason this team has been so good so quickly is because of how well their front line has played, in particular Variety, not just getting it done in his 1v1 matchup like here, outright soloing Ducky, but even responding to the buff invade presence that's coming in this one. This is Variety now saying, hey, if you guys are going to rotate over here, you best come correct, or I can step to you on an individual level again. And it's when Variety and Twig kind of come together to Voltron up into this right side map dominance that real problems develop for the other teams that they end up playing against. It's not just that Variety can get it done in solo, it's when he gets involved with the jungler. Then you start to talk about what their support and genetics has done, and for me this has been nothing short of just exemplary what we've gotten from genetics. I was one of his bigger detractors coming into this season, and as such I can happily be one of the ones that gives him his credit once he's earned it. He's done that here. When your frontline plays at this elite level, positioning optimally the way that he is here to cover the option, you've got Variety full on diving on the other side. That means that your backline and big man Tings has no care in the world. Look how far back my man gets to chill, line up free snipes, and his life is easy. As always and as forever, when your backline looks good, it's because your frontline's popping off, and that's what Variety and Genetics have done relentlessly, and I expect him to continue doing up against your, who was it, the Bolts, you said? Yeah, I think that's what you had.
Hey, I said they looked good last week, right? And then maybe they look good this week.
Dave, well, they looked good in the one set last week. We'll have to see if they can hold up. They got 2 tough ones for the Bolts this time around. And I was having trouble choosing a match of the week this week. I think I might have to give that stamp of approval over to the Bolts versus the Kings, just because it seems like it's going to be at least contentious between you two, and that's going to be spicy for me either way. So no matter what, we all have something fun to watch. But that's going to be able to do it for this recap. Thanks both of you for being able to come on here. Of course, Dave, we're going to keep you around. Finch, you get to go relax as you get prepped for the day. And speaking of getting prepped for the day, getting prepped for the league is something that a lot of these teams were doing, and mostly in the form of roster apocalypse, something that we're very, very used to. And while we were talking to a lot of these teams, we decided to try and get the scoop, because this year's roster apocalypse was a little more convoluted than some of the others that we'd experienced. It's been out for about 26 minutes now. I recommend watching it through the breaks. Make sure you always keep the show going. If the desk is going or the games are going, you want to watch here. But when an ad comes on, keep the tab open. We need the ad revenue. But then go to a different tab and continue watching the Roster Apocalypse video. We can give you a small taste of that here in a second. Because that, I mean, guys, it has been the most ridiculous story to uncover. And Aggro got to do it.
Wild.
Take a look.
Basically, from the outside in, it looks like we just stuck with the old Renegades roster. And then picked up Haddix. Or Harry left, picked up Haddix. But there was a lot more going on.
You know, I think I had a pretty good year. You know, maybe I'll, go see what's out there. Try to, get on like a really good team or something. We went out to dinner and I was like, hey man, 100%, or if it was like, are you on this team 100%? And I was like, yeah. And, 100%, is it really ever 100%,
So I was kind of in a weird spot. Then I was a little confused, and then that's when PK got back to me and said Nitroid had joined the Camelot Kings, and they were re-offering me the spot. So, now we are in a spot where I'm re-offered the 2-time world champions, and Jake's no longer on the roster.
It looked like roster apocalypse should wrap up pretty cleanly from here. Barra to PK, Jake to Nika's team. But 100% isn't always 100%.
It's always awkward when 100% isn't always 100%. Barra having the toughest decision. He was offered twice to be on a reunited World's roster team. As we all know now, I mean, look, we're 3 weeks in. There's no glossing over it. That didn't end up happening, but I definitely recommend you watch that. Barra, while we were doing that interview, he had a really big water bottle, almost the size of my cup, right? He finished the full thing because he had so much. He was he'd say something, he'd look down for a second, and he'd take a big drink, and you could get that weight, the gravitas. Either way, you probably realized at this point Mifflin is sitting where Finch once was. Mifflin, welcome to the show. Dave, welcome back. As we move forward, we're going to be starting to crack open a couple of conversations. One, I think, maybe leans into it. If we have the Blues graphics, we'll be able to look at some of the numbers and things that kind of came up last week, and that's going to be able to lead us very well into this next conversation. So, most importantly, I think you two got to cast it, the shortest game. One of you was on desk, one of you was on cast. I can't remember because you were definitely fighting over who got to announce the shortest game. It was 22 minutes, 3 seconds. That takes it for the phase so far. And, Dave, I've got bad news for you. I happen to look at the top KDAs. It seems like Finch's team that he backed during that Week 3 segment definitely favoring them a little bit. But the most interesting part of these, as always, I will make sure to throw this out there, Blues Ultra on Twitter, on Instagram, I believe on Reddit as well. But it's going to be some of these stats towards the very end. You can see all of the gods. King Arthur, I had highlighted a little bit earlier, on her falling down a little bit in terms of precedence. But the thing that has been most interesting to me is, I believe, the next slide, and the thing that really did make the big difference, which is the lack of certain gods that were very prominent last year. Blues had highlighted it. I actually liked it because, so you can't see it, I have just a really, really bad list of god names from right now, starting with Agni all the way down to Zeus, of those that have been played, those that have been banned, things that, so I can know, who are we missing, where are we going to see them. Oddly enough, this will come up a little bit later, but there's only one god that has been banned but not picked as of yet here in Season 8, which is very bizarre. I don't know how often that's going to happen, so I just want to make sure that's out there. But the question is, why are these gods that we got so used to seeing, they were so typical in conversation last year, not here anymore? So Hell is the first one on that list. Mifflin, I mean, what was a mainstay, constantly first pick, first ban, has just completely evaporated. Even some of the other healers have been able to make their way back. Where's Hell?
Well, back in Season 7, it really was Paul pioneering the Hell front, wasn't it? There was a couple-week period where it felt like the majority of teams were trying to run this god, and then as Season 7 started to trickle on, it really did become the Paul special. But in Season 8, we've had a couple of changes that have really negatively affected Hell. Namely, the out-of-combat healing change really does hurt her ability to sustain up her team throughout these elongated team fights around the Fire Giant and the Gold Tree as well. But I don't think that that's the linchpin, because we, as you already highlighted, Gore, have a lot of healers that have come back into the meta. We still see Aphrodite come through pretty often. Guan Yu is up there. Yamoja still gets picked. So what is it that keeps Hell out of the standing, out of contention in the picks and bans? And I think it's the itemization changes that we've seen come through for junglers. Hell really struggles once someone's able to dive onto her, once someone gets into that melee range. And with this bruiser-centric build with Shifter Shield and on Chile, all of a sudden, it's not really a trade-off. Back in Season 7, Hunbots jumps on you, Fenrir brutalizes you, Hell's going to return damage in spades, and potentially just win that 1v1. Now they're tanky, and they deal damage. It's really hard to survive out there for a Hell player.
Well, it's starting to sound like, man, we're probably not going to get to see her too often, although every time the Titans play, I have a little hope in my heart. It says just a Paul God, question mark, maybe exclamation point. We'll have to figure that one out as time goes on. I'm really excited to see if she can ever come back, mainly because I like knocking names off of my list, but for other reasons as well. She's fun to watch. Dave, I'm going to pilot us, from the mid lane over to the solo lane. I talked a lot about King Arthur earlier. But Cthulhu. This is a god that we got very used to saying last year. After his release, he came through. He had one of the biggest ones I think we got to see in SMITE, and how prominent he was. And he has not come through so far this year. Is there a reason that he is just devoid? Is the matchups bad? What's going on?
Yeah, it was kind of wild, right? You'd see a Morrigan sometimes, and you get 2 Cthulhus in a lot of these fights, and it would always just be chaotic. Actually, I'm going to kind of pick up right where Mifflin dropped off previously there. With Shifter Shield and Keeley being so strong in the current meta, that's sort of the itemization you tend to see these solo laners go towards. Tank Boots, Stone of Gaia, Shifter Shield, and Keeley. That's kind of meta. Obviously, situational items appear here and there, Spectral Armor, things like that. I think Cthulhu, truthfully, just can't itemize into what are the strongest tank/bruiser items here at the moment. He's a god that has to itemize a little bit differently because he deals magical power, and right now the physical power hybrid items are the ones that are getting the most play and the most value out of the solo lane, so it just seems like there's other item builds and other gods that do it better. Now, is there a world where Cthulhu, comes out? It wouldn't be all that surprising if eventually he does, right? I mean, he's not a horrible god pick or anything like that. It just seems like the itemization and the best gods right now are those who can itemize into Shifter Shield, Ankyle, Tank Boots, Stone of Gaia, things like that.
Everything you said makes sense, but part of me is still only going to blame Yarkor. I feel like if he was in solo,
Right,
we'd
his
probably
fault.
have seen it at least once, right? But because he's not there
That's on him.
anymore, we're not going to be able to see it. And you know what? I mean, I didn't actually intend for this, but that ends up being a perfect segue, jumping from solo to duo lane, much like Yarkor. Mifflin, someone that we got to see a whole ton last year, was once again these mage carries and very prominent. Like, we got to see Sol once after like a long period of time. I think Barra finally picked her up. Same thing with like things like Scotty, but they became these very prominent picks, specifically the Oleron that really was driving things home. And once again, he's disappeared. Granted, they disappeared kind of halfway through Season 7. I mean, was he just an ult bot? Is there anything more to him? Where can Oleron fit back in if he's ever going to come back?
If Oleron's in such an interesting spot right now, because back in Season 7, I like to say that he was much better played inside the duo lane, but now in Season 8, with this aggressive focus inside the duo, how's Oleron at level 4 through 9 going to deal with an On-Her jumping on him every single wave, or a Jingwei dashing on him? It just feels like he's going to get outpaced and have such a hard time getting that itemization available to him, as well as the healing changes does still affect Oleron. That little slight heal he gets from that third ability was pretty pivotal around these gold Fury and Fire Giant dances, but now it's pennies, essentially, with all that healing scaling coming through. So whether or not Oleron could come back, I think he could. With crit as good as it is, he's the only magical hunter that can crit, but he's just such a slow pick, and he doesn't have the safety that he used to in Season 7. I think it's going to be a while until we see him locked in, unless it is just for that Sanctified Field, which is still a fantastic no-play zone.
I mean, it was so predominant last year. I mean, we got to see him, like, again, most of our talking points for weeks at a time were Oleron this, Oleron that, and who's going to keep up with him? Hey, cool, you locked in Sol. Doesn't have that Sanctified Fields, though. Kind of sucks. Who cares? And as such, we've had to completely move on and leave him in the dust. Maybe we'll get him by the end of Phase 1. But all of these three seem to have something in common, right? Either the healing changes, item changes, like a lot of things that have really pulled them away from the meta. And that brings me to the fourth god and a final god that we're going to talk about here, which is Hebo. Because he was played jungle and mid last year. It seemed like items were good for him. Honestly, I would argue, just based on my Hebo experience, Spear of Desolation, Rada Tahuti, 2 big items for mid laners right now. Feels pretty good for Hebo. So Dave, where is he? Why no Hebo? He's my first diamond. He has a special place to me.
I think you can honestly kind of copy and paste the is it just a Paul pick down to something like this. Seems like Paul and Shinto are the two guys who have all these unconventional picks in these highlights here. Look, I think it's kind of simple for Hebo at the moment, where he's this big burst mage, his ultimate is incredibly bursty, but has to put him in range of the enemy team. And so it seems like if your idea on what you want out of your mid lane is big time burst damage, Scylla just kind of does that better, I think, at the moment, specifically out of the mid lane. Scylla can sit back, she can provide the crush, I'm a monster, all that from range, and that's good. Hebo, if you want that big burst kind of confirm, execute ultimate, you've got to roll yourself into harm's way. So it seems like right now it's going to be a pocket pick, probably out of the jungle, if anything. If we see it, it'll be kind of a niche pick. Maybe someone's feeling confident with that out of the jungle. But if you want a burst mage right now, Scylla's just doing it all better. And so I think it's the priority of other gods has kind of shifted away from Hebo because gods like Scylla are just doing so much better at the moment.
Well, they've been able to find that control, and like you said, safety is there. It feels like there's a little bit of room for Hebo to show up one day, and I'll keep my fingers crossed. But as of right now, today, well, I shouldn't say that. Today might be that day. You never know when you get to see what we will get to see, especially with things like Herwin joining. Although Herwin, if Yanis is available, we know exactly what he's going to be going forward with. It'll be fun to see. But all of these gods, and trust me, guys, there's a long list. I have not picked or banned, and there's 42 of them. So there's still concepts, Apuash here. Amaterasu hasn't been picked up. Artemis, that's just the A's, and that's literally because I could glance over there really fast and see them at the top of the list. But that is going to do it for the topics of what we haven't seen and maybe what we could see, but probably not at the same time. Instead, we can move forward to Fact Seat Gaming, the questions that I get to write. And admittedly, I will say have absolutely flabbergasted me because I wrote these 4 or 5 days ago and have completely forgotten most of these since then. That being said, I've also said, I think, 2 of them today. So if you were watching the SCC or if you were listening into my monologue, you should actually know some of the answers to this one. That'll give you a 50% because I've got 4 of them ready for you. Let's go for question number 1. Athena, who has been this very, very prominent pick and ban that we have seen, had an interesting week number 3. What was her win rate?
Why do I want to say 0 because she didn't get picked at all?
Got to be a round number, right?
I don't know.
I will tell you,
she was picked. She was picked. Okay.
She was picked a non-zero amount of times. I think it was like 3 games. I got you.
66%.
Oh man, no, who
rate.
was
3?
I think she won 1 out of those 3 games. I think she's 33% win rate in week 3.
So we got a 66. We got a 33. You're both actually going to be too high. She got a 0%.
Oh, so I was right initially.
Week.
Yes.
She had 7 bans, 3 picks. So only 10 of the 12 games played.
Wow.
And she did not manage to win a single one of them. And now there's conversations to be had about when they were picked. I didn't actually, I could probably glance through, see which teams were picking her up. I see the Oni Warriors playing her twice there and losing to the Bolts twice. So there's going to be 2 of their losses right there. But at the end of the day, maybe she's not as high priority as she once was, or maybe she's in that conversation as Tiamat, where she is absolutely someone that you still need to be worried about. But we'll have to figure that out throughout the rest of this weekend. I wanted to jump. I was looking at some season-long stats, and I had 2 that really stood out to me. First and foremost, which god do you think has been played the most across all regular season of the SBL?
Like
there's a lot of gods up there. It was actually really surprising. In history, against all SBL. Dave, I do realize now that I'm asking you this, that there is a little bit of a detriment of knowledge there because you weren't there for season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah. So Miff, all the pressure's on you.
No. Yes, you, Dave.
Most picked of all time. I don't know, man.
It's got to be on her,
support
right? It's Sobek. Sobek, got it.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe a support. Maybe. Go ahead, Corey. Miff's got the knowledge on this.
I'll actually throw it out there. So Sobek was the reason I looked this up. We were talking about him with some of the devs. I think it was me, Aggro, and in Balance. We were like, I wonder what, I don't even remember the organic moment it came up with, what was like how Sobek had been played, because Aggro had also assumed that maybe he was the number 1 pick across all of the SBL.
Right, we have to be right.
But he did fall short. He was number 5 on that list, or maybe he was number 7. One of those 2. There were a lot of people above him. Rom was played above him. You have to remember, I think in Season 2, he was a very big player. But of course, there's one guy, we should all know him, that it makes sense for him to be number 1. Thor has been played the most of every god across all of the SBL. Makes a lot of sense. He's been played in 1,252 games. 1,252 right there. A lot that he has been locked in. Think of the Anvil of Dawns. That's got to be a ton of them.
Do you have the wins handy?
Oh, I probably can get them real fast for you if you want me
No,
to.
you don't have to.
Let's-
You don't have to. I was just
Oh, you
curious.
know what?
Put 'em
I'll
on the
start
spot,
it
Dave.
because it is going to. It's going to have to pull for all regular season stats. It's going to take a
Alright.
little bit. And while it does that, I can bring up the next question, which is still all regular season games. It instead focuses on the players. I will give you a hint to let you know that the answer to this question, they are in the league this year. Which
Batman.
player has played the most regular season games ever?
And they're in the
Zapman
league
or
this year.
Barracuda. Zapman. Is this pre-SPL as well, or is this only SPL?
This would be.
Barracuda.
I think it's only SPL when I click all regular season on
Okay.
this. That's a Zayadin question
gotta
for
be Zap,
pedantics,
yeah.
but I'm going to assume it is just SPL. And so I heard Barra and Zap.
Yep.
And it's interesting because those two are the most, I would say, it's storied as well, against each other. That's the one that we've really looked at. But it
But-
actually ends up
Don't
being
embarrass me.
Raffer.
Oh.
With
Raph.
515 games played, he has played the most. The person right behind him is actually Twig at 505,
Twig.
just 10 games off. So there's a good chance that sometime in the
Wow.
next couple of weeks, Twig might be able to surpass Raffer for the most regular season games played. Dave, to answer your question, 51% win rate there for Thor.
bad.
Well, I've got it open.
Okay.
I'll go to games played on players, make sure I'm looking at this one. Raffer has an overall win rate of 68%, 26 first
Whoa.
bloods, and a 2.3
Jeez.
KDA, whereas Captain Twig is actually not that far off. 505 games played, 63% win rate, 2.4 KDA,
players.
67 first bloods there for Twig across 505
Junglers, am I
games.
right?
It's going to go up this
Doing
year.
pretty well. But now we're going to zoom back in. Let's go back to just Season 8. So they're going to be able to come through. Yeah, they do just start with SBL. So it starts at Season 1, and it brings it up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now has all been factored into that one. So that's going to be good for you to know. And here's the more important question, narrowing it down from 1 to 8. Last week, very specifically, we already talked about Athena.
Easy.
But on the other side, who was the most picked god last week? I have said this today. Very loudly.
Jingwei.
King Arthur.
King Arthur.
Yeah, King Arthur
That's what I
is
meant
going
as
to be.
well.
Yes!
Yeah, I could hear
Yes!
that. Mifflin said,
Woo!
he said,
Yeah.
Jing King,
Yes!
Way Arthur. Yeah, I got what you meant. He played 10 games of the 12 last week. He was banned for one of those, so there was only one game where he was completely ignored. I think that one's
boots,
good to
stomach
kind of
guy.
hammer home my point. I just think he's going to be very important this week, and so it'll be very fun to see. And as always, we already talked about King Arthur. We don't need to go much further into that one. We have a bonus question. I don't know what this one's going to be off the top of my head, so I'm going to read it off of the screen once it flashes in front of me. Also notice my eyes are a little green today. That's different. That's just going to be
your shirt
that's
color.
there's your bonus
Very
fact. They
nice.
shift between blue and green. So which
There you go.
I got to close my show flow real fast. Which god pre-Mulan has the least amount of games played across all of the SBL? Now I have the answer for this, so I'm going to let you two get your guess in because I happened to look this up while I was looking at the most played games. I think I have the answer for
God, I
this.
mean-
I know someone's tied at the very bottom for a very interesting number. If I hadn't closed that
Here's the
tab, I
problem.
could cheat.
Like in recent memory, it's like Zeus or Opwash or something. But they were probably good way back in the day. When,
Yeah, I'll
when-
give you a hint. There, I can't remember if it was season 2, 3, but there was a point where Opwash was a busted
Right,
god. I mean,
right.
he was really good.
It's gotta be Baba Yaga, maybe?
I think Baba Yaga's post
Was that
Mulan.
post Mulan? Bless.
Yeah.
I'm so bad at this. So I'm gonna go ahead and steal Dave's and
Yeah, wait,
toss
who-
out
who is-
Zeus.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right.
Zeus?
I'm
Oh,
going
you
to
said
throw out
Zeus. I'll stick with
Anubis
Zeus.
because I believe Anubis had like 33 total SBL games, and that's
Anubis!
exactly what it is.
Whoa!
Yes!
What?
Yes,
What?
man, I
You're
got it.
nuts!
That's exactly what we
Yeah.
needed. I was looking it
Yeah.
up because I was trying to figure it out. He is, I believe, tied with Baba Yaga at the very bottom. So Baba Yaga, in a short amount of time, I believe it was, has 33 games, or somebody that was released literally last year has the same amount of games as Anubis over his career of release. And by the way, he was in the game at the beginning, so it's been a little while for Anubis. I think
Yep.
Twig was the only one who really picked him up last year. I think we even got to see him more last year than
Twice.
we did some of these other years combined. But we'll have to figure that out. I'm going to be living on a high for the rest of the day. I'm happy
Yeah,
I
that's
knew
good.
that one. I love the bonus questions.
That's a
But
good
now we
feeling.
can move forward to the SPL and looking at the standings for this week as we come into it. This is going to be where things get really interesting. Dragons playing a little bit
Bolts,
later today.
baby.
Up in number 1, the Bolts. Sitting at number 3, just above the Kings, hanging out in the top 4 with the Leviathans. But I believe that first matchup that we have is going to be the Titans and the Valkyries, if I'm remembering correctly. I have it open over here. Yeah, the Titans
Right.
and the Valkyries, Dragons and the Bolts a little bit later. Just a fun fact for you, the Titans had a 3-loss streak prior to, well, their win last week, right? So they broke that one. The Valkyries are on a 2-loss streak as of right now, 2 in a row. The last time they won was against the Warriors in week number 2. It was a 2-0 for them. So that's going to be a very highly contended matchup there. And I think the next jump up, the Dragons versus the Bolts, maybe the first one in that conversation, Dave, for you as to what could really happen. I mean, this is going to be very interesting. The schedule for this week is probably the most hectic that it could be for some of these teams. Double header for the Bolts, double header for the Dragons. I saw a lot of people mentioning that the Dragons only seem to play on Saturday. Well, this is your week for the Fridays and Sundays. Mifflin, anybody standing out or any match individually standing out to you?
I am, in particular, incredibly excited for this Tartarus Titans Valhalla Valkyries matchup. Anytime the Valkyries get a chance to play, I think is really important just to heat check the league. I have them kind of slated as a team that should be doing pretty well, but has not quite got their footing under them. I'm pretty pumped. Leviathans versus the Valkyries, I'm not as excited for because I've got Leviathans at like a 90% chance, a 95% chance to win that one. But the Titans, though, with how they've been struggling so far this year, I think should be a very good matchup for the Valkyries.
And you get to cast with me. So, that's why you're excited about that, right?
Yeah,
that's
there
cool.
you go. That's exactly what it is.
thumbs up.
Miff, you're also right on point. I happen to have them written down over here, but Valkyries were voted, the Leviathans were voted to win, at least in the in-game client when I checked it, 94%. So really right up there with you over what the Valkyries are going to be able to bring. And I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. It was Tsukiyomi. 33 games on Tsukiyomi, 33 games on Anubis. That was the thing that caught my eye. I just couldn't remember the god. Either way, an interesting one for it. So now, with Week 4 on the horizon and coming up, let's take a look at the predictions as well as how we've been doing. I don't know if I'm looking forward to that part, but the first half of it's going to be really fun when we take a peek to see how we've been voting. Split pretty much.
Let's go,
right
Gore.
here. Me and Dave hanging
Let's
out
go,
with
Gore.
the Valkyries and the chat and
across
the community.
the board.
The Titans chosen for Myth, Aggro,
Let's go, chat.
and Finch. I don't know why I completely blanked on Finch's name. Aggro
Who is
even
that guy?
has the Titans over the Warriors there tomorrow. That's
Wow.
going to be interesting. He's actually the only one that breaks anything else. It's this first matchup that's contended, and then Aggro alone on a hill. It's either going to die on it,
Wow.
or he's going to end up having a higher percentage than everybody on the next graphic because of it. And that's going to be devastating when we won't hear the end of it. But it's going to be interesting. I think it's nice to see that today, at least, is split half and half in the first one.
Let's
We're all hanging out in
go!
the 70s, 72,
Yeah!
72, 72, 72. And
Let's
Dave,
go!
king of the hill up there at 78. There was
Let's
someone you
go.
voted for
I went
last
up.
week that everyone else didn't. And you were able to get that one right. So you're doing it good. You feeling good about your predictions this week too, Dave?
I am. And it's because chat and I stand together this week. We have all the same
Jesus.
predictions. Gore, you're with me as well, and that's really what puts me above.
Well, that
all
makes
the
me
rest
feel
here
better,
this week.
actually.
right. All of us are together. Look, anyone who's on the 78% team, right, is probably feeling pretty good about their chances at getting, I don't know, maybe even up to 80% here this week. So, chat, you, me, and Gore are all hanging together on our predictions this week. For what it's worth, there were, what'd we say, only 2 that were kind of split? So there's a chance we all kind of tank if some of these matchups start to go the other way.
I mean, Mifflin asked me about this first one this morning. He was like, which way did you guys vote, Valkyries or Titans? And I said, look, dude, I voted for it yesterday. There's a good chance I woke up and I could flip a coin and tell you which one I predicted. Like, I have no idea who's going to be able to win that one. Mifflin, are you excited?
Oh, I'm so pumped, man. I'm more excited to hear Dave flip-flopping a little bit, kind of hailing the Bolts earlier on in the segment, but I didn't see any Bolts votes there, Dave.
They're
What's up
playing
with
the
that one?
they're playing the
Fairweather
Dragons and the
fan.
Kings. It's
Fairweather
a week
fan.
3 recap. It's a week 3 recap. We're recapping what happened last week. We're not predicting what's happening this week. I recapped what happened last week, Mifflin. We're playing the Dragons and the Kings. What? Gore, please send us on before I
Well, yeah, at
or
this point,
something
we've
like that.
taken up enough of your time. The SPL is going to be starting up pretty soon, guys. We got to get things set up. We're going to take a quick break. Hey, during that break, you can watch the Roster Apocalypse video. Make sure you leave this tab open, though. You want to be here when things kick off in just a second. SPL starts in just a few minutes.